to Survivor Speaks Investigates, where truth leads, silence breaks, and every case gets the voice it deserves. I'm Survivor Speaks, and today's investigation starts right now.
What's up? What's up? What's up? It's your girl Survivor Speaks back here with a new live. I didn't want to do mesh lives together. So I said that I was going to come back so I can provide the update on in the D4vd case. And here I am. So I do have to read the disclaimer because here I go. Just do need to read the play my disclaimer because we will be looking at using a video from Jesse Weber's Law and Crime. The video link is in the description. Hold on one second. What's going on here? So the video link is in the description. I don't know what's going on. Okay. Like, what is going on here? All right. So the video link is in the description, as I stated. And I wanted to make sure that I give credit to my sources. I also use TMZ as a source. Don't have a link to that because I'm not actually using TMZ's information. I'm using it as it pertains to law and crime, and it may we may I know that they used TMZ as a reference too as well. So I do have TMZ in the description as a source, just like to cite my sources, make sure that they're getting the credit about where I'm getting the information from here. So now there has been a major development just unfolded in the D4vd investigation. Reports confirm. Hold on one second. I forgot one thing here, so it's not too. All right. So reports confirm that Neo Langston, we talked about it last week. He was arrested. Clink, clink. And so he had got out on the $60,000 low bail. I believe that was quite low. We are really not knowing if he testified in the grand jury as a witness or a possible suspect. But okay, let's go. So reports confirm that Neo Langston has now appeared before a Los Angeles grand jury connected to the ongoing case involving Celeste Rivas Hernandez. In this video, we break down what a grand jury appearance means, why Neo's testimony matters, and how this could influence the direction of the investigation moving forward. So this is a fact-based update focused on court processes, timelines, and legal impact, not speculation. All individuals are presumed innocent unless proven guilty in a court of law. So subscribe to the channel over here on for responsible legal news breakdowns and real time cases, and we also rewind and do cases that have already happened and some cases that you may have not seen. So now I'm going to say this right at the top. If you can hit the like button, even if you're coming in on the replay, it is a free way to support the show. YouTube has changed their guidelines, so all the likes and the comments really mean something. Once the video is over, there may be a hype button there. There may not be a hype button there. But if there is a hype button there, if you could please hype the video up, that's another way to get it into the algorithm. And a free way to support the show as well. And I know I'm going to be a little more consistent moving forward, but life be life for me, so I have to do things you don't want to win a lot of times at the spur of the moment, depending on what's going on. I promise you, when everything is all over, you guys are going to hear all about it. You heard me? You're going to hear all about it. All right. So anyway, let me run my disclaimer, because I want to make sure that, we're doing that one. Since we'll be using a video from Law and Crime with Jesse Weber.
This video is being shown to you under Section 107 of the Copyright Act of 1976. Allowances is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, education, and research. Fair use is permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. Smash that like button.
Zach. Okay, as I stated, we're not going to be here too long in this space. I just got off of a live previous to this one where we're listening to the victim and survivor of R. Kelly that was seen in that video as a minor. And she wrote a book and she's finally speaking out in her own words. All right. So let me bring the video over. This is regarding D4vd. And the update that we have here from Law and Crime. As I stated, the okay, so as I stated, the information for the link to the video is in the description. All right. Hold on, let me just, because sometimes this thing be making stuff worse. All right. Give me 1 second here. There we go. All right, I just need to make sure, because Jesse Weber has music in the beginning of this.
Out in Montana has testified in front of the grand jury.
Hold on.
Big news in the David.
Come on.
Testified in front of a grand jury, seemingly in connection to the death of Celeste Rivas Hernandez. We've talked about this before, whether or not a grand jury is hearing evidence in this case. And of course, she is the 14-year-old girl who was found in a Tesla reportedly registered to David, that this was back in September of 2025 out in LA. Now, how do we know that he may be testified in front of the grand jury today? Well, one of TMZ's reporters actually caught Neo Langston entering the Los Angeles courtroom today. They were bombarding him with a series of questions about him testifying, about David. He didn't say a word. And I want to explain why this is such a big deal, if this is true, okay? It was reported that when Langston was arrested out in Montana at his mom's house on a Los Angeles warrant for failure to appear as a witness, something we talked about here on Sidebar, it was because he allegedly refused to testify, potentially in the grand jury. We couldn't confirm that for sure, but given his apparent connection to the singer, as documented in photos and at least one video online, but people put two and two together and they're like, of course he's testifying in front of the grand jury. Of course he was picked up on an out-of-state warrant to bring him back to LA to testify. We didn't know for sure though. But now that he's reportedly seen going into that building, the courthouse, given the reporting that there is a grand jury that has been hearing evidence in this case for months, now you put two and two together again in a very different way. So he's probably testifying, right? I mean, I guess it's also possible he was appearing in connection with the failure to appear charge, but I don't know. I want to talk about that. TMZ also reported that they ran into somebody else walking into the courthouse. LA Deputy District Attorney Beth Silverman, who is allegedly the one presenting evidence to this grand jury. Now, she didn't say anything to TMZ as she walked in. But by the way, TMZ reported that back in December, there may have been a conversation in that courthouse hallway between Silverman and an attorney named Evan Jenis. Jenis apparently represents Robert Morgenroth, another David figure. He heads up David's touring company, his manager, who we believe also may have testified in front of the grand jury. And this conversation between Jenis and Silverman, per TMZ, was allegedly about, yes, a potentially uncooperative witness. Are we talking Neo Langston? Is everything fitting in here? We don't know for sure, but I mean, the pieces seem to be lining up that this guy now just testified at a very pivotal moment. And here's the interesting part. If he was testifying in front of the grand jury and presenting evidence against, let's say, hypothetically, David and or anybody else in connection with the death of Celeste or the disposal of her body, wouldn't you think he would testify for a while? Apparently that's not the case. TMZ is reporting that Neo Langston was only in front of that grand jury for 30 to 40 minutes. Again, assuming he did testify. But that's it, 30 to 40 minutes? What does that mean?
Wow.
I have no idea about what that could mean if it's true. I'm going to talk about it with a former federal prosecutor. We're going to bring him on in a second. But the value of Langston's testimony, what is his alleged role? Let me just hit on that for a second. Again, he was picked up in Montana, arrested at reportedly his mom's house. He was then transferred back here to LA, booked into the MDC, the Metropolitan Detention Center. He was released on a $60,000 bail. And I go back to what Steve Fisher posted on X about Langston's arrest when it happened. Steve Fisher, we've had him on the program. He's the PI, the private investigator, who was hired by the owner of the property that David was reportedly staying at in LA, possibly near where the Tesla was found. Steve posted the arrest of Neo Langston for failure to appear to give testimony, which are the exact words used by the sheriff's department when speaking with me, concerns me to a certain extent, assuming this arrest is related to the Celeste Rivas Hernandez case. Targets are not typically called to testify in a case, essentially meaning somebody who could be charged. Had Neo received a target letter, he almost certainly would have retained counsel and invoked his Fifth Amendment rights. That makes me think that he is viewed as a witness rather than someone currently at risk of being charged. Did one person act alone in concealing Celeste's body? If this was a homicide, did a single individual act alone without a conspirator? I find that unlikely. This leads me to believe that Neo may represent a last-ditch effort by prosecutors, a Hail Mary of sorts, because they do not yet have what they need to fully make the case. They may be attempting to pressure him into cooperating, potentially by offering immunity. Is Neo the last hope? And by the way, I go back to what Steve Fisher told me on a recent episode of Sidebar about what he thinks Neo's potential connection to this criminal case is. Take a look.
I'm looking at this whole situation a little bit broader than just the homicide. I understand the homicide is what we're looking for, but Celeste was trafficked, and listen, there's messages back and forth. They knew her age, and so it's not just that. Listen, there's sex crimes against this girl, and there's certain people that knew what was going on. There's certain people that gave rides to her back and forth, even to Lake Elsinore, and so it's not just the homicide for me. I just think that this is one of these things where we got to start standing up for these young girls that are just taken advantage of by these predators. Mm-hmm. And I hope it's not a situation where it's like, we can't make the homicide, we just can't get there with it and let it go, because there is other crimes, whether it's concealment of the body, whether it's anybody that helped in facilitating her to stay with David. And so it's not just the homicide, it's just everything that happened to Celeste. It's the whole breakdown.
And so while it's been speculated, although not officially confirmed by officials, that David is being considered a suspect or a target, particularly for homicide charges, we don't know for sure, there has also been talk about whether there is a second suspect too. You have acclaimed criminal defense attorney Mark Garagos spoke on the Two Angry Men podcast back in November that according to people he talked to who are connected to the case, investigators may be looking at a new unidentified second person that was involved, quote, before, during, and after Celeste's death, that they may have digital evidence to support it, cell phone data, social media activity, digital data from the Tesla, that this evidence places this person in the same Hollywood Hills neighborhood during the time when either Celeste died or her body was found. So again, we don't know for sure, but what's Langston's alleged role in this? What could it be? So I want to talk about Neo Langston possibly testifying in front of the grand jury today, what it means. Let me bring on former federal prosecutor Nima Rahmani. Nima, thank you so much for taking the time. Really appreciate it. Do you think he testified in front of the grand jury today?
Jesse, I do think he testified. The question is, what did he say and did he invoke? And I think the two most important things to know, and this is me sitting in downtown Los Angeles. I'm about a mile less than 2 miles away from the courthouse. There's two things to know about LA that make it different from different jurisdictions that we cover here on Law and Crime and Sidebar. First, TMZ has its finger on the pulse of Los Angeles. Their reporting is very, very accurate here in LA. They know people at the courthouses and the clerk's office and the DA's office. They have sources that more traditional media don't have. And the second thing to know is this: in LA and at the district attorney's office here, they rarely proceed by grand jury. So grand juries are used in the federal system. They're used in most states back east. Here in LA, they almost always proceed by a complaint and a preliminary hearing. So the fact that we have a grand jury in this case is unusual. Now, obviously, Celeste has been presumed and found dead since at least September, and obviously she was missing for many, many months before that. So the question is, why is the DA's office using a grand jury in this case and not just charging David or other co-conspirators? And they're using the grand jury for an investigative function, and that investigative function is to lock down witnesses like Langston. They're going to plead, they're going to plead. But ideally, in a case like this, where you have an individual who's the target of your investigation, David, and he's surrounded by an entourage, and members of that entourage probably don't want to cooperate or rat or snitch, whatever you want to call it. The DA, Silverman's trying to use this grand jury to lock in their testimony. So when they go to trial, they can't go sideways.
Basically, if they take the stand, this is not what you said in front of the grand jury. You told the grand jury X, Y, and Z, way to hold them to their feet to the fire. If he really testified only for 30 to 40 minutes, okay, does that make sense for a grand jury witness?
No, usually in a murder case, you're going to expect much more testimony than that. And obviously, look, we know the grand jury can move quickly. There's no defense attorney, so there's really no objections, and things tend to move much faster because there's no ruling on those objections. There's no cross-examination. But obviously, if he's going to be a key witness in a murder case, you would expect more than 30 to 40 minutes of testimony. Now, if you were to just invoke, though, Jesse...
Well, explain what you mean by that. Explain what you mean by that. So invoke his Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination, and why would he do that, and what would that look like?
So if you were to invoke before the grand jury, that would probably be a much faster series of questions and answers. Obviously, he would give his name, some identifying information, but anything related to the disappearance of Celeste Rivas would be met with, I assert my Fifth Amendment privilege. And after that assertion several times, that testimony is going to be over, absent some immunity, which we can talk about. I don't necessarily think that they would have given him an immunity, because if they did, again, I would expect the testimony to be much, much longer. So I don't know if he wasn't cooperative. I don't know if we went through him invoking. Frankly, I don't know if he's represented, if he was arrested and didn't surrender. So there's a lot of unknown questions. But typically, like you said, you'd expect to hear more testimony than that, or something shorter if he was just going to invoke.
I want to peel that back a little bit for a second. So first of all, if he did that and he invoked his fifth, can the grand jury use that against anybody they may be looking at charges for? Is that something they're allowed to consider?
Legally, no. If someone asserts their Fifth Amendment privilege against self-incrimination, their right to remain silent can't be used against them, can't be used against anyone else. It's a constitutional right. Now, practically speaking, do grand jurors and trial jurors implicitly say, hey, well, this person invoked, they must be guilty? Maybe. But certainly the law is that they're not supposed to do that.
Let me ask you another question. Have you ever seen a case before where the target of an investigation, a potential defendant in an investigation, has testified and in front of a grand jury, and the grand jury ends up indicting that person? Because I always thought, and I've been part of a grand jury before, it's usually the lead case agent, the lead detective, the victim. It's not the whole case. It's not the whole, everything that's presented during a trial, but it's enough evidence to support probable cause. And then the grand jury comes back and you need a majority to say there's probable cause for an indictment. Have you ever seen a case where, let's say he testified, whatever he testified to, if he testified, whether he invoked the fifth or not, and they might return an indictment against him?
I have seen cases where someone's testified before the grand jury, and because they've lied, they've been prosecuted. But usually the target is not someone that you call into the grand jury because they're the target of the investigation. right? That's the person that you're trying to indict. Now, there have been instances where it's in a questionable case and the target has wanted to testify and try to explain away their case to the grand jurors, and I haven't allowed that. But typically, there's two types of people you do not put in front of the grand jury: your defendant that you anticipate indicting, or your star witnesses. And the reason you don't put your star witnesses is you're potentially creating impeachment material that can be used against them at trial. Now, if you want to lock in that star witness, that's a different story. You're going to run that risk. You're going to have them testify. You're going to send that transcript to the defense. But you usually don't want your witnesses testifying under oath because there's always the possibility that they're going to say something different and inconsistent. That's why in states that do allow for depositions in criminal cases, the defense attorneys do them all the time because then they can try to trip up those key witnesses at trial.
That's what makes it so confusing. If he was important enough to grab it from Montana and bring here, 30 to 40 minutes of testimony doesn't, on its surface, make sense unless they wanted to lock him down for some key points in this case. Do you think that he's somehow involved in this? And again, it's so much speculation because we don't know officially if there's a grand jury. We don't know officially what charges they were looking at. Steve Fisher said they should be looking at charges related to not only her death, not only her potential disposal of her body, but whatever alleged relationship she had with David as a minor. And so do you think, based on the surrounding circumstances as you see it, is he a witness? Is he a target? Is he an accomplice? What do you see?
I think he's likely a witness. And again, I'm going to assume for the sake of argument here that there is a grand jury impaneled and that they're looking at murder charges, disposing of body, sex trafficking, other sex crimes because Celeste Rivas was a minor. Then the question I have is, Langston, what role did he play in this inner circle? Was he someone that lived at the house? Was he frequently there? Did he have access to the Tesla? Or was he someone on the periphery? I don't know what his relationship is and was with David. If he was a member of that close inner circle that was living with him and touring with him and helping him with music, then you're right, 30, 40 minutes seems light. If it's someone that just happened to be present, on a small number of occasions, then maybe you get them in and out pretty quickly. I just don't know what his role is, but what leads me to believe that this is an important witness, you don't go through the trouble of getting an arrest warrant, going out of state, having that individual arrested, unless they're a key witness. That's just not how the LA County DA's office typically works.
And I just want to be clear. All the points seem to be saying that he testified in front of a grand jury today. Yeah, I mentioned even Beth Silverman going into the same courthouse. You could say, yeah, he was there. Yeah, she was there, but he was appearing for a different purpose. Could it be that he was appearing in relation to his charge of failure to appear as a witness? He appeared in front of a judge. I don't know, but you tell me.
Yeah, it's possible that it's something else. But look, the most likely is that this was a grand jury. Because if it was a failure to appear, why would the lead DA on a murder case show up to handle that failure to appear? That's just not something because the failure to appear itself is not a serious charge. So you wouldn't typically have the assigned DA investigating a murder case handling a low-level misdemeanor like that. It would be whoever was on duty in that courtroom on that particular day, that assigned DA. So the fact that they're both going in together or at or near the same time, again, this is all just drawing conclusions based on limited information, but the most likely thing that we're dealing with is Langston testifying before the grand jury and Silverman examining him.
Would you, if he testified, and he testified today, would you expect charges soon in this case? I don't even know who it would be for. I made this point with Steve Fisher too. Like, I understand his reservations and his concerns about Neo testifying and being brought there, but it's also the possibility that he could be testifying against, let's say, hypothetically, David or other people, and he doesn't have a role in it. If he testifies though today, should we be on the lookout for charges for an arrest? I don't know, in the next few days, next few weeks?
I mean, this case is a head scratcher. I'm surprised no one has already been charged, right? I mean, at a minimum, we know that Celeste's body was found in the frunk of the Tesla. And now it's been many, many months without charges. I don't think we're waiting for any more forensics. I think we're waiting for the toxicology for the LA County. And my understanding is those results are complete because the DA's office moved to seal them and not have them released as a public records pursuant to the California Public Records Act. So it seems like the investigation is done, whether it's video, whether it's electronic. I mean, there's not a whole lot that's left aside from these witnesses. So obviously, look, you want to get it right. But again, I'm sitting here in LA and there's the perception, right or wrong, that, it's crime has run amok here. And the Celeste Rivas case certainly is not helping, because you have this young girl that was missing for so long. And then now that her body was found, there's still no charges in this case. I mean, obviously, it's not a case that I'm handling, but from a perception problem here in Los Angeles, both in terms of law enforcement and prosecutors, you want to get it right. But this delay is certainly raising a lot of questions here as to what LAPD and what the DA's office is doing and what is taking so long.
And it's easy for me to sit here and judge and say, I mean, why aren't they doing this? Why aren't they doing this? I don't know what's happening behind the scenes. All I will tell you is there are a lot of people invested in this case. If you even look at the comments on our videos here on Sidebar, people are frustrated. They want answers. They want justice for Celeste in some capacity. You can only imagine her family. Hopefully they're getting more answers than we are. But look, we will continue to monitor this. This is a big development. We will see what happens in the days and the weeks to come here on Sidebar. Nima Rahmani, as always, thank you so much for taking the time. Really appreciate it.
Of course, Jesse, thanks for having me as always.
And that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar, everybody. Thank you so much for.
All right, and so that is the update. Neo, who had been, missing in action. They were saying that the witness was previously a woman, and Neo was arrested at his parents' home in another state, and so he was bailed out and testified in front of a grand jury. They don't know if he invoked his Fifth Amendment right to remain silent, or if he said anything because they're saying that he only was in the court for about 45 minutes. So we don't know, because we're not, the grand jury is not open, to the public. So we won't know what they spoke about until, they finally arrest someone, or, they make documents in the website public, because the medical examiner was, forced to have everything placed under seal. So there's no transparency when it comes to the public getting that information. And that is what we are waiting on. But our main focus is that there is justice for Celeste Rivas Hernandez. She was taken advantage of as a child. There's a plethora of videos, social media accounts where she was seen with D4vd. As you know, they are alleging that he started talking to her when she was just 12 years old, possibly 11. And then she started running away. We know that she is forever 14. She turned 15 and they discovered her body a day after her 15th birthday. So of course she had been in the front of that Tesla for a while. So she's 14, forever 14 to us. And so we just want to see this baby get some justice. I feel like there are so many people that felt her, including some of her family members. I mean, I'm just going to call it for what it is. And we don't condone any of that, but you got to have some type of conscience, right? So anybody that participated in this crime, it is very, very hard for me to believe that you have an easy time sleeping at night. That's just my thoughts. Could just be me, right? Could be my own moral compass, right? But I do believe that you know, who the people that were involved in this should have a very hard time sleeping. But who am I? I'm just Survivor Speaks over here. We're Survivor Nation, and like we just love, you know, covering the crime. We like to see when justice is served. So I'm going to get ready to get out of here. I told you this wasn't going to be a long one. I just got off of a long live covering the Roshona Landfair book we're currently listening to. And so I wanted to make a separate video because this is about Celeste, D4vd, Neo Langston, and, you know, the whole debacle going on about this 14-year-old baby Celeste Rivas Hernandez being found in the front of D4vd's Tesla. So I'm going to end the show like I always end the show by bringing awareness that men get breast cancer too. Because of the stigma surrounding the word breast, we have changed the word to peck and or chest cancer here on the Survivor Speaks channel. We want to continue to bring awareness that men get breast cancer too. And to all of my beautiful ladies, please make sure you're getting your mammograms, filling on your boobies to make sure that you are all right. All right. And don't you dare let anyone come into your house and disturb the peace that passes all understanding. I'm Survivor Speaks. I'll see you guys in the next live, or maybe in a premiere, or be in the comments, or somewhere else here on these socials. So enjoy your weekend. Be safe. Make sure you have your identification on you, because ICE is out there doing what they want. All right. So I'll talk to you all later. Peace.
If you have made it to the end of the video, you are the real MVP. So don't forget to comment, like, share, and subscribe. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Thank you so much for watching.